Hello everybody, this is Sangeet from Bit of Learning. Today I wanted to demonstrate how easy it really is to construct a React app with Google sign-in. So what you see on the screen right now is a nifty little application I constructed which allows you to sign in to your Google account, and for that I'm using the Firebase web kit. And if I click on this login, then what it does is it shows you this modal which has the option to sign in with Google. Once you select that, it pops up this picker and you can select one of your Google accounts to sign in with, and then it takes you back to the app, and you'll notice that the login has changed to a logout because now you're signed in. And then if you go to dashboard, then it shows you welcome, first name, last name. And the other thing you'll notice is that if I refresh the page, then I remain signed in. So what I've done is that I've constructed a custom hook, and each of these, and this custom hook can be accessed from each of these components. So home, about, dashboard are all separate components, functional components. And the way I'm sharing state across the whole app is via this custom hook. So I'm not using, say, Redux, or I'm not using React context to, share state across the application. All I'm doing is using this custom hook, and it works really nicely because it makes the code very simple, and you'll see that once I start writing this application. And what I was really trying to do was mimic what you see, say, in other applications. For example, you'll see over here Washington Post. Now over here, if I sign in, then it gives me the slew of options to sign in with, right? It gives me a whole bunch of providers, and if I sign in with Google, then it says continue with Google. You select that, and then it gives you this picker where you can select one of your accounts. And if you notice, you have something similar over here where I say log out, I say login, and again it gives me the slew of accounts to sign in with. And for now I just have Google sign-in configured, but the idea was to add other providers over here, just like you have, say, in Washington Post, where you saw that it gives you, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Apple, and you can do the same over here. You can add other providers using the Firebase console, and I'll add that functionality later, but I did want to demonstrate how you can sign in using Google first. And it's really surprising how simple it is to do this. And I'm just using TypeScript create React app, and I'm using a few other libraries such as, of course, the React Router version 6, and I'm using the Firebase web npm package, and I'm using style components also, because I've done the styling using style components to give it this nice look. And what else? I'm using one other package which gives me this nice button, so I didn't have to craft this myself. I just used that npm package. So just with a few packages I was able to get this app up and running. And let's start by first creating the app using create React app. So the first thing that we'll do is create the app itself, and I'm using create React app with TypeScript. Next, let's install a few npm packages. This is for the modal that you see, in which I embed the Google sign-in button. This is the React router. This is the Firebase JavaScript SDK npm package. I'm doing the styling using styled components, so I have to install both the styled component itself along with the type definitions. This is a nice npm package that gives me just the UI for the various login, sign-in buttons. So this is where I get my button for the Google sign-in. This package allows me to read .env files, so I can then customize the env files depending on the environment that I'm running. So I find this very helpful. So here's the bare bone TypeScript React app, and the first thing we'll do is I'm going to create a few folders. So under source, I'm going to create a components folder. And within that components folder, I've created a few other folders. I have common, so this will contain all the components which are shared across all the other components. And then I have OpenID Connect. This is where I'll put my login and logout component, and then I have pages where the rest of the pages are going to come, and then I have a root folder where I will create the main app itself. And then I've also added a configuration folder, and this will be the place where we'll initialize our Firebase app. So now in the root folder, I've created a main.tsx file. So this is just the skeleton of that file. And then let's go to app.tsx and let's get rid of everything that we have over here. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And what we want over here are our routes. And for that, we'll use React route. So what I've done over here is that I've created my routes. For now, we just have that one file main, which is in the root folder. So that's going to be where our whole app is going to lie. And the path is /star, because that will contain all our child routes too. So next, what I've done is I've just created two empty components, login and logout, in the OpenID Connect folder. And these two components I'm accessing in my app.tsx. So I have a route of /login for the login button, and this should be logout. Okay, so we've set up our main routes. Next, we'll go to our main component, and here we'll start writing our application. So before we start writing our main application, I've also added a few additional files. They're just the shells, empty shells. There's the about component, there's the dashboard component, and then there is this home component. And then in the configuration folder, I have this Firebase configuration file. And for now, it's just empty, but we are going to get the configuration, the web app configuration from Firebase console. And I'll show you how to configure that. So that then allows Firebase Auth to know who's calling its services. And we're going to get the web API keys and app IDs and such. But that we'll do a little later. So what I've done in the main component is just set up the links. So we have the links for home, for about, for dashboard, for login, and then also for logout, and we will be toggling this depending on whether the user is logged in or the user has logged out. And then along with that, we have to define the paths, the routes for these links. And the way it works now with React Router 6 is that you define a index route. So what happens is that if you notice that in our app.tsx, we have the main component with a /* and that will route us to the main component itself. And if it does not match any of these routes, as in doesn't match any of these paths like /home, /about, /dashboard, then we need to specify an index route. In other words, so over here, if we click on home, then it's /home, hence it takes us to home. Same thing for about, dashboard, and login. But if there's a path which doesn't match, and in this case it's just a /, then we specify an index route over here so that the home component gets loaded. So one additional thing that I've done is that I have styled this file using styled components, and just to give it a prettier look. And style components is, if you haven't already worked with them, is really a fun library to work with. It gives you this component approach to writing styles, and I really like that. So let's say we have the nav bar, which was the nav initially, and then you just specify nav bar over here, and then you can write actual CSS like so. And the great thing about using styled components is that it's easy to see that nav bar over here maps to this element nav bar over here. So it's easy to read, it's easy to maintain, and I find it to be a lot of fun writing applications, styling those applications using styled components. And one other thing that I've done is that in the styled nav link, if you come to the style nav link over here, you'll notice that if I look for the class active, and if it is active, then I lighten the color a little bit. I change the color. And so that's the reason if we are in the dashboard component, then it will show you, it will lighten the dashboard link. Same holds true for home, about, and I think this is really a nice touch. So now that the basic shell of our React app has been set up, the next thing to do is to register that app with Firebase, because we need the configuration settings that we're going to get from here, and we need to then put it in our React app. So what you need to do is click on this go to console, and this gives you an option to add projects. So select that option, give it a name. We don't want to enable Google Analytics. This takes about 15-20 seconds for the resources to be provisioned. Okay, so our project is now ready. And over here on the left, you're going to see a whole bunch of options, build options. So we can have authentication as a service, Firestore database as a service, real-time database as a service, storage, hosting, functions, and machine learning as a service. But for now, we are going to focus only on authentication as a service. So let's select that. Select Get Started. And now let's add Google authentication. So we have an option to add Facebook, Microsoft, GitHub, Twitter, so on and so forth. But for this demo, we are only interested in Google sign-in. So let's enable that. We need to give it a support email. Okay, so once that is done, we need to head back into the project settings. And here, let's configure the app itself. So this is going to be our React app, our client React app. So let's just call it Firebase Auth React Router v6 client app. And let's register it. So once you do that, you notice that you get a bunch of settings. And this is what we are interested in, because these are the settings that we need to copy, because this is what we're going to dump into our local React app. So Firebase platform knows who's calling its auth services. One other thing that you'll notice when you come to the sign-in method is that you have these authorized domains, and essentially the authorized domains, localhost is included in that. So when we access these auth services from localhost, then we are allowed to communicate with Firebase Authentication. But in a production app, you're going to add your domain over here, because that will ensure that you do not have other fraudulent client apps trying to access Firebase Authentication services on your behalf. So this is a security measure, but for now we are good. But I just wanted to mention that this is where you would add your production domains. Next, we're simply going to paste the configuration settings that we copied from the Firebase console. And let's go ahead and export this. And we could just leave it as so, but it's a nice idea to make sure that if the app already exists and we have already initialized this, then we return that app rather than reinitializing. And that's just what we are doing in lines 16 to lines 23. Now let's see if we can log in, if we can authenticate ourselves against Firebase Auth that we just set up in the Firebase console. So I'm going to do some quick and dirty programming to see if we can sign in. So a couple of things I'll need to get from the Firebase npm package. So the first thing I need to get is the Google Auth provider, and then I will need the sign in with pop-up. So we'll sign in using the sign in with pop-up option, and then I will also need get auth. So this get auth is a method which returns us the auth object. So then the next thing we have to do is also import the app, and that app we will get from the Firebase configuration. So we have what we need in terms of imports. Let us also get our fancy Google sign in button, and that we're going to get from, there you go, yeah, social login buttons. And the button we want is Google login button. Okay. Have what we need. Next, I will get this Google login button, and here let's write our sign in the on-click handler. So what we'll do next is we will const result, and we will now call the sign in with pop-up. This takes two. It will take an auth object and it will take the provider. So let us get the auth object. Let's say const auth. And we then pass in the app that we just initialized. We also need the provider, so we'll say const provider Google auth provider. And so we pass in the auth as the first param, and then the provider. This returns a promise, but we are waiting that, and we do need to wrap this in async callback. And let's just console.log results. So now we should be able to sign in. Let's see if this works. So if we go to login, then it shows us a fancy login Google button. Once we click on it, there you have it. It shows us the various sign-in of Google accounts. It shows us the picker. Select one, and let's see if, there you go. It's logged us in. It's returned the login results back, and this is our user object, and this is the access token. I'll talk about this access token a little bit more, but essentially we were able to successfully log in. Now, carrying this a little further, the next thing is that what do we do? How do we access this results object elsewhere. In other words, how do we access this user object elsewhere so that other components like dashboard, about, home know that we are logged in and have access to that user object. So if they want, then the dashboard component should be able to show the confidential information, the protected information, which you can only view once you're signed in. To do that, we will access another method that the Firebase npm package provides, and that is on auth state changed. Yeah, that's what we need. And so we listen to this on auth state change event, and let's set up first a use effect. For now, let's give it an empty array. And so we can say something like on auth state changed, and this then needs an auth object, which again we're going to get from by calling the getAuth method. So auth getAuth. This getAuth we again have to import, and we again need the app object. This is the app that was initialized. And so we just have to pass in the app object. So the first argument is the auth object, and then second is a callback. So here what we'll do is that we will set this to state. So for that we will use state. We have user set user sorry, user set user, and this is going to be use state, and the type will be user or not. And this user again is a type that we can get from Firebase Auth. Go use state. Thought it could have transparently imported use state. It did not. So there we go. And now we can set, we can say if the user was returned, then go ahead and set our state. Set user to user, else set user to not. And then what we have to, now we can look for this user. So let's say the user existed, or user was returned. Then we can output display the name, or if not, then you can say not log. Let's wrap this up. Not logged in. Let's see what happens now. There you go. So as you can see, we got logged in, and since we are logged in, it displays the first name, last name, and it's getting the user object from the state over here, which we are setting, and the state itself is being set within the auth state changed callback. And so if, say, we wanted to do the same thing in the about page or the home page, then what we can do is that we can implement the same logic in each of those components. But as you can see, that's going to be redundant, right? Because we'll be duplicating logic across the app, and that's not something we want to do. We want to be dry. So the way to do that is by creating a custom hook, and we'll just call that custom hook, which will then return the user object. But as you can see, we made a lot of progress. We were able to successfully log in. And so next, I'll just show you how to construct that custom hook. And then we'll just call that custom hook. And that will return our user object. And that, again, the good thing about that approach is that we don't have to worry about having, say, using the React context or using Redux or using some other mechanism of sharing state across the app, because now we have the custom hook to do that for us. So we'll create the use auth custom hook in the common folder, since we'll be sharing this component across the app. We'll also want to import a few functions and a type from the Firebase Auth npm package. We want get auth, and we also want on auth state changed, and we'll get the type user. What else? We also want to import the app itself that we've initialized, and that comes from configuration, Firebase configuration. Of course, we need use effect as well as use state, and these all come from React. Okay, so we have all the imports that we need, and the next thing to do is to write the custom hook itself. So what I'm going to do is that I will have use effect and here I will call the on auth state change, and this takes two params. First is the auth, and we have to get this auth, so we do const auth get auth, and then we pass in the app. So we have the auth, and then we have the user object, which is returned to us via the callback. And this, well, let me at least console.log this user. And so what we'll do is that we'll want to store this in local state. So for that, I have user set user, and this will be use state. It could either be a user object or it could be null, and we'll initialize it to null. So we'll say if the user was returned, then let's set state. Else we'll just set state to null. One other thing we need to do is that over here I will have an unsubscribe, so the handle that on auth state change returns, and we are going to then call this when we return, so when we clean up after ourselves. So the return function will come here, and we'll call unsubscribe. So now that we are setting our user object here and everything is done, the only thing that's left for us to do is to return this object, user object, and we'll also return the auth. So this will have, will return both the user as well as the auth. Let's also set up our dependency area. So, and this says that we need to update, so we'll pass in the auth object as a dependency to the use effect hook. Okay, so this essentially is all done. There's one other little thing that I would like to do, which is that I would like to set up a mounted variable. I'm going to use a useRef for that. We again need to get this, import this from React. And the reason I'm doing this is that if we try and set our state when the component is unmounted, then we'll get a no op error message in the console. And we don't want that. So let's initialize this to mounted current to true. And if it is mounted, so we'll say if mounted current, then set user. Similarly over here, we'll say if mounted current, then set user. And one other thing we need to do is that when we unsubscribe, right above that, we'll set mounted.current to false. So if we happen to try to set the user when this component is not mounted, then it won't allow us to do that. And so once that is done, we essentially have everything we need. I can't think of adding anything else. From here, if we go to, say, our dashboard, then you notice how easily we'll be able to clean up this code. All this now is happening in the custom hook, right? So let's get rid of this, which means we can also get rid of all this over here. And now we're simply going to call our custom hook, and we'll say, well, it will return the user from, sorry, we need to import this. So we'll say import use auth from common. And then we'll just say use auth. And let's just save to see if this now works. And you'll notice that I can now get rid of all these imports over here. We just need this one import, which is for the use auth. Let's save. And let's refresh. There you have it. We're logged in. So now the beauty of this is that we can go elsewhere. Let's say we go to our main component, and over here, if you noticed, I have this login, logout. Now over here too, all we have to do is go right to the top, and let's import use auth from common user. And then we can come down, and over here we can get our user object from our custom hook. And then if you go down to line 15 below, then here we can do something like user. If the user exists, then so here we'll do and then if the user does not exist, this actually should be reversed because we are saying, so this should actually be if not user. How about that? There you see the logout button because we are logged in. And if you weren't logged in, then this would be the login button. So you can now see how easy it is to find out if the user is logged in or not, because we have this custom hook which is doing all the heavy lifting, and all that we have to do is call this custom hook and you get all the information you really need. If you refresh, then again, there you go. It's a persist state. Now, in any of our other components, we can do the same thing. We can just call this hook, this custom hook, and we'll know whether the user exists or not. And I think this is just incredible that we are able to implement this application-wide state management by just having a custom hook. Now let's continue with that and also implement our logout. To do that, what we're going to do over here is that we can again have a use effect hook. But before we do that, let's go and import one other function from the Firebase npm package, and that will be sign out. So now what we're going to do is that the moment we call the logout, we want to sign ourselves out. So let's have use effect here too. And this will get triggered when this is called. We just need it to be called once, and then we can write async. We'll be awaiting this, so async function. Let's wrap this. We want it to be called right away. And over here we can have and to this we need to pass in the auth object again. And for that, what we can do is we can import the auth object from use auth custom hook. Because if you remember, that's something that we were exporting, returning along with the user object. So let's say closed auth it's asking for, I think, the auth object, so let's pass it in, and that's it. I think that should do it. Let us save this, and let's give it refresh it. Log out. Yep, we are logged out. So we're not routing this back anywhere. So even though we are logged out, it's showing a blank page because we aren't returning anything. We aren't returning any UI. But let's say if you were to go back, and there you go, you're not logged in. So again, log in. It shows us the picker. We can select one of our Google accounts, and it takes us back, logs us in. As you can see, we are consoling out the information, the token returned from Firebase Auth. We click on the back button and refresh, we're logged in. So in the final app, I've just spruced things up a little bit, where when you log out, you're routed back to the home page, and when you log in, then you're taken back from where you came from. So say you were in the dashboard, and then you log in, then you're taken back to the dashboard page itself. Another thing you must have noticed that when you log in, I have this nice dialog, and that I'm getting from reach dialog from that npm package, and I'll show you what it looks like. I'm essentially just styling it over here. There's nothing else to it really. And this also gives me the option to add other sign-in providers. So say Twitter or Microsoft, similar to what you saw in say other applications. So if you go to say Washington Post and try and sign in, then you have a whole host of options to sign in with, right? You can sign in with Google or Twitter or any of the other providers. So, having this modal gives me the option to add other providers. And the other thing you'll notice is that when you log in, like I was saying, you're taken back from where you came from. And the way that's happening is that if we go to main component, then over here, when you log in, I pass the current location path name. So I pass this to the component itself, and then I pass this using this use location hook, which comes from React router down. And once I pass this location, this path name, this route, then in the login button, I then get it back by going to the location. I get it from location again. So I again get use location, and then it gives me the location.state, which will have the information that I passed in over here. So the state information, it then is available to me in the location object as the state property. And then I can route it back, I can navigate back to that route. So I sign in, I see if there is anything in the location.state property. If there is, then navigate back to that location, otherwise take us back to the home page. And yeah, so that's another thing that I've done, and that's essentially the whole application. I hope you enjoyed seeing this and learned something and found this useful. I will have a link to the GitHub repository that has the whole application, and please do subscribe and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this video, whether you found it useful or not, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for watching.